Hello and welcome to our first technical webinar of 2025 on the D-TRO project. I'm John Cooper. I'm the product owner for DfT. We are expecting Paul Chandler, service owner, to come along. But today we'll be running through quite a few things to do with the service. As you know, there's been quite a lot's happened since the last time we had a technical webinar. We did have a regular webinar a couple of weeks ago and we updated then. I'll be giving a quick update on general things in a moment, and then we'll go into a more detailed what's been happening in beta with Dr. Gareth Tilley, before we move on to looking at data specification updates and other technical stuff around the building of the service. We might be having a demo from me, but perhaps we will keep that up our sleeve. And there will be an opportunity to ask your questions in the chat, as ever. There's a couple of links in there for our general information, the TTF website and our GitHub. And we'll try and answer as many of the questions that come in via the chat towards the end, and we'll give out more general information as things go along. So without further ado, let's go on to the update from what's happened since the last webinar, or in the recent history of the project at least. We are, as you know, in our private beta phase, but the good news is that in January, when we went to our GDS assessment with the DVLA acting for the Cabinet Office, and we passed that assessment on all of the 14 GDS government digital service standards. So that paved the way for us to move into an actual full public beta. More on dates for public beta a bit later, probably. We are running on the service version 3.3. We had wanted to call this just 3.3 and then be moving to just having 2 levels of service, but we are actually at 3.30 in our production environment and 3.31 in our integration environment since a few weeks and months ago. But we are aiming to move towards a fully synchronized production and integration environment situation in the near future. More on that from John Harrod Booth in the data specification section. At this point, just a quick reminder that our preferred route for receiving feedback on the service is via our GitHub. And that's one of the links, as I said, I put in the chat. We've got over 75 issues. We triage GitHub on a daily basis. We try and respond as quickly as we can. We sometimes add things to backlog for future fixing. And then they are prioritized, and we can roll them into the service on a kind of need to have basis. We carry out other daily triage on our various mailboxes and other routes of receiving feedback. And we, as ever, we continue to do user research on the project. Even though we've passed our assessment, we will be continuing to want to talk to you. And we have regular catch-ups with the major digital solution providers ongoing on a weekly or sometimes more infrequently basis. Those are our major routes of hearing from you. There's also, in recent times, the secondary legislation consultation has been launched, as you will have seen. This is active now, and perhaps we can put the link in the chat to the actual page where we've got the documentation of the consultation. This is still running until the 21st of March, so you've got just over 3 weeks to comment on that. This is on the regulations that support the primary legislation that came in last year and will pave the way for formalization of the requirement to submit digital versions of TROs to the D-TRO service. We just did an FAQ update. Sorry, it took us a while to do that one. We're now working on the next update that includes the last webinar, and no doubt questions raised in this webinar will go into the next update. That is enough from me yakking at this point. I will now hand over to Dr. Gareth Tilley, and he's going to run you through a bit more of a detailed update on what we've been doing in beta and how it's going. Over to you, Gareth.
Thanks, John. I just wanted to give some of the kind of high-level stats first. So this is kind of data we've got in the production environment. And the big news for us, exciting news for us, is that we've now got over 7,000 D-TROs as of this morning in the live service. So that's in the production environment. That's available for data consumers. One of the great pleasures on this project is we have been able to see, working with digital solution providers, we've seen them putting TROs in, digitizing them into the service via the API. And then we've also seen, speaking to data consumer colleagues, them equally then being able to display those TROs on their services. So it's been great to see that end-to-end process. So the service is kind of live, operational, fully running. And as I say, we've got 7,000 D-TROs in the service. So we've got a lot more organizations in integration. As you can imagine, that's our test environment. And we've got several organizations who are, regularly testing, consuming and publishing there. In terms of production itself, we've got 8 organizations now in production who are fully onboarded. And in terms of that's kind of the organizations themselves. But as you know, the way we structured the service, that means in terms of digital solution providers, they then link to the TRAs, which is our D-TRO parlance mainly for local highway authorities. We use TRA as that's in the legislation. But effectively, they've linked the 3 DSPs we've got who are onboarded. They link to 22 local authorities and can provide a service then to publish for those TRAs. We've also got a TRA who's self-publishing as well. And then we've got 5 data consumers who are actively drawing on that great data that we've now got in the service. So that's a flavour of where we are in private beta and the production environment itself. And considering we only kind of launched that in November, I think it's, been a real success to get so many D-TROs in. And what we're seeing is, we're seeing over 100 basically published on a daily basis. I mean, that's a kind of cadence, gives you an idea of how many D-TROs we're getting in on a daily basis. John Cooper, that was the main highlights I was going to cover in terms of the update. I don't know if there's anything you want to add as well.
No, obviously the main thing you're probably waiting on is an idea of when we'll actually transition from private beta into public beta. I've just put in the list in the chat the list of a link to where you can find the list of who is participating in private beta. That includes the TRAs and the digital solution providers, DSPs. Obviously, when we transition into public beta, and I think we are not yet quite set on that date. We have been talking about March 2025. Obviously, that's Monday. That's not going to happen. But could it happen by the end of March? That's a possibility. We will make a firmer announcement on when actually public beta is going to start. At that point, we will widen out the those who are participating, and our numbers should rise up accordingly. So obviously that's a very big moment for us. Just a probably a mention for self-publishing TRAs, as per the question in the chat just now. We do support all forms of publishing to the service. We don't require anyone to actually use a DSP. If they want to use their own software, that is fine. We have started a Teams channel for those such-minded TRAs to share ideas and see who the other self-publishing TRAs are. If you are not on that group and you would like to be, there is a short question and answer thing for us to send to you just to get you onboarded due to the foibles of Teams in corporate scenarios. But we can get you on board with relatively little fuss. Just let us know, either drop it in the chat or send us an email to our D-TRO at dft.gov.uk email. Okay. We will do our best to kind of stimulate the conversation in the Teams channel. We know it isn't the liveliest place to go to read stuff, but the idea there is that it's a self-service area for Teams people to see who is doing similar kind of thing. If you've got any questions about being a self-publishing TRA, we will be delighted to assist. Just ask us a question outside of that group if the group isn't working for you. I think at this point, though, we should move on. We can pick up other questions that come in through the chat at the right point later on. So I'll hand over at this point to John Howard Booth, and he's going to lead a session on the data specification for us.
Thank you, John. Good morning, everybody. I'm John Howard Booth, supporting DfT. So we're going to go through, this is just the contents list, so there's a few bits and pieces to go through today. So Gareth, can you move me on? So in terms of release schedule, we're constantly listening to what you have to say, whether that's coming in as GitHub comments or emails into the mailbox, or indeed through the regular face-to-face sessions that we have. And one of the comments that came up was to do with the casing that's used within the schema. So I hope casing is understood by everybody. That's basically the format that we use when we are donating objects and attributes within the schema. And there was a lot of discussion around that. We recognise that it's caused some issues, and so we are seeking to address that. We're doing that as a hot fix. So the plan is that we're going to introduce that into the integration environment, and we will be using camel case. And if those are anybody who's not familiar with what camel case is, the word camel case is written in exactly the right format. So that will be deployed into integration with the expectation that that will occur next week. That will mean that you should be able to evolve your solutions to move towards that. At the same time, we will be up versioning the specification and the schema. So we'll go to 3.3. And we'll also issue a new set of documentation, and that includes a new set of example files. Having already spoken to some of the digital service providers, we will then aim to bring that mix into production environment around mid-March. So we'll deploy the same 3.3.2, which has got camel case in terms of the schema, into the production environment. It's also worth saying, at the same time, we will introduce the tighter validation that exists within integration into the production environment. We are then preparing to do a further release, which will be number 3.4. And current expectation is that that will occur in April. We've yet to fix the exact timing of that, but we will certainly aim to get documentation out as early as we can and release that first into integration and then later into the production system. And that's trying to cover a number of different things. So John mentioned that we have had a number of GitHub comments. We try to respond to those as quickly as we can. Indeed, some of them do go onto the backlog. So we are addressing within version 3.4 quite a number of the backlog items. So there's quite a long-standing item to do with no return times and maximum stays, and we'll be addressing that. There's also, if you look at the secondary legislation, you will notice that there are certain sets of data that are requested, which at the moment the model the data specification can't support. So we're introducing a small number of additional fields to enable you to do those things. And that includes things like, is the TRO on a road that's got bus routes on it, which is part of the secondary legislation, but also introduces the real-time start-stops for TTROs, which are under the direct control of local authorities. All of that, of course, assumes that there isn't a significant change following the consultation. So we're going to build it with the expectation that that will be the case, but we may have to alter it after the consultation finishes. That also includes some other things. So we've had a few, not a huge number, but a few instances of people saying, could you please add different additional regulation types that don't appear at the moment. So we've had things like prohibited parking on footways. And indeed, yesterday there was a suggestion of a closure to public rights of way. So any and all of those, please let us know, and we will introduce as many of those as we can within the 3.4 release. We also have, if you run across something where you say, I don't see it in your list, we have an extension mechanism that's built into the data specification. At the moment, it doesn't work, not because it isn't supported in the data model or the schema, it is, but actually quite how you should use it is not specified. And so we will be clarifying that as part of that mechanism. So as I said, we expect that to be released into integration within April. We will come forward with precisely when in due course, and then shortly then thereafter, in consultation with you, the stakeholders, we will then introduce that into production. After that, we are expecting to move to a more regularized approach with releases. So we will be aiming for approximately 6 monthly. Obviously, if we have significant issues to address, then we'll address those quicker, but we're trying to get to a regularized position where things are a bit more predictable. Okay, next slide. I'm going to hand over to, if I may.
Thanks, John. Hi, everybody. My name's Ben. I'm leading the technical work and the delivery on this piece of work. So just wanted to take a moment to talk about some of the architecture rate limit increases that we've made. So this comes in response to some user feedback and understanding of the API usage patterns that we can see from the logs. As a result of this, we've increased the rate limit, which was previously 80 requests per minute to 120 requests per minute. So this should hopefully help reduce the frequency of which people are seeing some of those HTTP 429 too many request errors. Something to note here is the rate limit is actually pooled across all clients. So that 120 per minute rate limit applies to everybody using the service at once and is not per client. We will continue to monitor the usage patterns around the API and your feedback to understand whether this is a sensible limit, whether there's further changes that need to be made. And the other point to make on this is that analyzing that data, what the usage patterns of the API are like, enables us to extrapolate and understand what the expected traffic might be as we move towards public beta. And as a result, we can take a more intelligent approach to determining what an effective or suitable rate limit is, and that's on a per client and global application level as well. So just a quick point to say that hopefully you'll stop seeing some of those 429 errors that you may have seen before, and we'll continue to kind of address this and analyze the data on there. I'll hand back over to John.
Thank you very much, Ben. Next slide, please. So one of the other things that we're doing in the background is there were comments coming from the stakeholders about the documentation. So we're trying to listen very carefully to what's been said. One of the comments was that developers would like to see a more interactive version, particularly of documents like the data model user guide and access to information about the data model. So we are looking at doing this. So I'm going to manfully call Gabriel to step forward, and hopefully he should be able to give you a demonstration, at least the first version.
Yeah, so hello everybody, my name is Gabriel. I'm one of the developers. So what I'm going to do is going to share this first stab of this documentation. So what we have here, it's as you can see, you know, and I'm sure you've read the you know data model user guide. So we have all of these objects and all of this connectivity, and it is in an interactive way, which means we can go to any of these items, for instance, and we can see the details about it. For instance, if I want to go here, I'm gonna expand this a little bit for you to see it. So basically, in this source, it's giving you all of the attributes and all of the associations and the items and the constraints that there are to be you know, abide by. And also you can go back and you can see here on the left hand side, and this will be incorporated with the user guide, where you have all of the different objects and all of the different types that we are using. For instance, if we go to the polygon, we can see that you know, the association and all of these details will be filled out with information. So in this way, you will have a clear understanding of how the things will work and what you know, links to what. Obviously, if you go to the main data model, you will see that you have if I can scroll a little bit on the right, you have the submodels that you can go to. So you can click here and you can see the submodels here with all the other submodels that are within. So basically, what we are trying to do in improving your user experience is that you will have at the click of a button, you will go directly to the property that you need, and you will see it. You know, what are the values, what are the constraints, what is the necessary thing you need to improve. So basically, this is the first draft of the how the data model user guide would look like. So hopefully that will improve your user experience. And that's on me. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel. Gareth, thank you. Okay, and then last small section from me. We are in the process of trying to develop good practice material. Obviously, there are questions get raised through any of the channels mentioned previously. What should we do about this sort of situation? We will try to develop material that informs that. So it's additional to the pure data specification itself and trying to provide some guidance. But for example, we had one question which was, I have a number of regulations that are coincident geographically. They come from different TROs. What is the expectation in terms of what comes in as a D-TRO record into the D-TRO service? And I hope it's fairly clear, but maybe we need to reiterate that each D-TRO record is supposed to be linked to one and one only TRO. So I think in that instance, there were 4 sets of regulations in the same place that had come from 4 different TROs. So we would expect there to be 4 records. We've also had questions around to what level of detail should be supplied in terms of exemptions and conditions that exist in regulations. If you look at the secondary legislation, it basically says all of it. I'm sure this may raise some debate. There are some regulations that at a national level that infer other regulations, so double yellow lines, for example, and the permissions that grants to disabled blue badge holders. Having sought input from the policy side of DfT, the answer is the expectation is that the D-TRO data specifies all of that detail. And part of the reason for that is we don't know who our data consumers are likely to be in the future. We can't infer that they have specific traffic engineering regulation knowledge coming from the UK, and therefore having inference in the data is challenging, and we should aim to try and make it as complete as possible. That may well raise some comment, but that is the position that's come back from the policy side. And I think that's us in terms of the data specification update.
Thanks, everyone. I'd just like to add my own take on what the guys have been explaining. And just to add in, I believe that in the HTML guidance documentation sort of upgrade, we are intending, as well as those ones that Gabriel showed, to also include into that piece, hopefully, the broader, more generalized guidance as well, so that it becomes available as the official version on HTML live pages, rather than being available as downloads on a GitHub, which can then be perhaps saved off to local systems and then assumed to be the latest version, when in fact the latest version is always kind of like a live version. So that is also a future upgrade that we propose to have, and that is in response to explicit feedback that we've received in the user research sessions. So it's all kind of a virtuous circle of improvement. There will be plenty of other things as we go into beyond this phase of launching the versions that John Booth has described through 3.3.2 into 3.4. When we reach to 3.5, say in autumn 2025, as well as having the improvements that will bring in terms of model upgrades and everything, we also hope to have better service related improvements in place, so that onboarding and management of the service is more integrated and user friendly, and other improvements. So watch this space as ever for improvements on the service. I think we're moving at this point into the Q&A. Thanks, Gareth, for moving and prompting. There are some questions that have come in. Quite a lot of these relate to the detail of the TRA Teams group. We'll collate all these and be sending you out the short questions that enable us to onboard you. Basically, your council with a .gov.uk domain has to be officially added to our teams. We can't just go in and add anybody external due to the rules and regs of the DfT digital services. There was some question around who is participating, and I put in the link to the participant list. Also a clarification that I put in about the numbers of contributors at the moment, that not quite matching who is on that list, but some of those participants are consuming data at the moment and not publishing, but will be moving into publishing. Others are developing client lists and will be moving into publishing as and when they can. When we go into public beta, of course, we'll be expanding and letting anybody come in as a consumer, and then letting all the legitimate publishers that have working relationships with TRAs in as publishers, and then we'll keep going onwards and upwards. Just a point from earlier on what Ben was saying about rate limits. We are keenly looking at all our back-end data and trying to make estimates of what we would need to go to in terms of the rate limit further down the line, when there's many more publishers coming in. That is stuff we're doing right now. We also note, though, that the patterns of publishing to the service have been quite cleverly adapted to by some of the DSPs. We see them programming their systems to publish at off-peak hours. This ensures that there's not a lot of other publishing going on, and that they won't have problems with hitting any rate limit. So that's all good news about how the behavior on the service has changed. We will answer questions about who is doing what, hopefully, but we will check in with those TRAs that are doing certain things, just to check that they're okay with their details being shared. And I'm pleased to see that there are several requests to join that group, and hopefully we can, by getting a greater number of those TRAs, the self-declared ones who are trying to use software and not go via a DSP, that we'll get a bit more of a energy and rate of posting on there. Just looking further down the question, there is a question here from Martin. Is there any update on the plans for schema compatibility when moving to newer versions? Will D-TRO records be upgraded to newer schemas in the service when older schemas are no longer used? Putting this onto the DSP or the TRA to do will be a major overhead and should be part of the central service. And thank you very much to JHB for coming on screen with, no doubt, an excellent answer to this one. I do know that we have been considering this, Martin, but thanks for raising it here. Over to you, John.
Yeah, it's certainly a consideration. At the moment, we're in the fortunate position that we don't have tens of thousands of records in the service, but clearly as we move forward with between different schema versions, different specification versions, it is a consideration. We're discussing the options internally about how to best address that. We have had comments from some DSPs who've said, as we upversion the specification, that they would be very happy to republish everything that they previously published. So that may be a different mix coming from different suppliers and different stakeholders, but it certainly is a consideration, and we've been looking into it. We will provide updates when we are able to.
And thanks, John. There is a supplementary, which we always love. With the next schema 3.4, will organisation names, TRA name, I believe it's called, be associated with the TRA code be included? Otherwise, each consumer of the data will need to link GeoPlace, SWA codes, SWA codes to make them meaningful. I know we've considered this one as well. What's the latest on this one?
So we have a number of things that are on the backlog. We don't have infinite resources. I think the view at the moment is with this one that it wasn't a high priority action to fix, because the data is publicly available, and it will introduce to us the need to do a certain amount of validation. So if we introduce those codes alongside the existing, those names alongside the existing codes, we obviously need to validate, and you as a data supplier would need to provide exactly the name that appears in the GeoPlace SWA list. If there's a strong groundswell that says that's useful to do, then we can do it, but it's not an obvious thing given the resources we have to hand to address. We have some more pressing issues, so not at the current time.
Okay, yeah, that was my understanding too. So thanks for confirming. Here's a question, another one from Martin. What are future plans for reporting concerns with data quality? Looking at just geometry, there are a number of D-TRO where it's not suitable. Points where there should be lines, polygons, and straight lines going through buildings rather than following the curve and straight. And Martin, I'm very glad you've asked this question as well, because this has also been something we've been thinking about this week. I know that we have been doing some great service design work on building up flows of how error reporting will take place. We don't have service design on this webinar, but suffice to say that I believe we're getting in designs in place and plans for doing this very thing. It may start off as more of a minimum viable product error reporting system, and then further develop into a more fully fledged service. As ever with our agile projects, that's how they tend to go. Gareth, would you like to add in at this moment?
Yeah, I was just going to echo what you said. Really, the designs we're working on is the degree to which, you know, we're not really the philosophy on the surface isn't that DfT are necessarily going to be a quality control or anything, but we do want to be a good conduit between the people who are generating the TROs and the D-TROs, and being able to give good feedback and error reporting directly through to those people from data consumers, ideally through the service. So, JC, as you said, we had a really good session on that earlier in the week, didn't we?
Yeah, there's indeed. There is a fine line between DfT being facilitator of the reporting of the any potential glitches to the publisher, and then being the D-TRO police in terms of enforcing stuff and being forever vigilant and checking. So we need to make sure that our lines are drawn correctly and that we behave in an appropriate manner. But we will be surfacing these expectations, and some of the design work will start to manifest itself in development work, and we'll have things to offer you in the coming months. There is another question on diversion routes. All those on production seem to follow street centre lines. The user guide refers to providing sufficient intermediate points so the diversion path can be plotted. There could be too much ambiguity with this, so given all diversions are plotted already following centre lines, shouldn't this be the guidance and the intermediate points idea dropped? Is that one for you as well, John?
Yes, for sure. Actually, going back to the previous question, it's a matter, and as John said, we've discussed it in the last week. We've actually been discussing it for about 5 years as to what the right approach is. So if we look at the existing use by the digital service providers of how they code and represent different forms of TROs, different practice exists, and it exists between different authorities as well. And part of the challenge that DfT has is to try and strike a middle ground between providing a specification which is extremely clear, arguably punitive, you know, there is only one way to do it, and also trying to offer a specification which has some degree of flexibility. I, for one, am very aware of this issue, and it certainly is an argument that I've brought into the various projects, the D-TRO projects over time, which says DfT needs to develop tighter data quality specifications. I believe that will come, but also at the same time, having a backlog of information that can inform that is a useful thing. In terms of diversion routes, we're very open to different ways of doing things. So if you have concrete suggestions, please let us know. Certainly, John has shown me examples of some pretty complex diversion routes that we've seen in some of the existing production records. So the way we specify it can be done, but it's not the only way for sure. So come forward, put forward specific proposals, and we'll look at them, and if that makes sense, we'll address them.
Yeah. I'd agree with that. Yes, I confirm I have seen some very detailed ones with many points along a string showing what the route is, quite detailed. Less often seeing the more skeleton type approach, to be honest. But we keep an eye on it. We want to improve our searchability of D-TROs that have diversion routes as well. Moving on, there is a question from Peter about multiple TROs on the same geography. He's specifically mentioned you, John.
Yep.
If a bay is currently written in a schedule item as limited waiting 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., and then in the same TRO, the same bay is also listed as 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. taxis only. In our view, is that inputted as 2 D-TROs or 1, as they are in the same TRO?
So my response to that, Peter, is 1, you should have multiple provisions in the one record, and those multiple provisions should be able to address all of those different constrictions that exist. If you want us to provide, I do realise I can see at the bottom of the screen just below that there's a comment from Sarah. I know Sarah raised an almost equivalent issue on GitHub, and I thank David Gruar because he's responded more quickly than we have. This is the way to manage those situations. So if they exist in the same TRO, then they should exist in the same D-TRO record, but come in as separate provisions. And I think that probably addresses Sarah's next question.
Yeah. The D-TROs can, obviously, they definitely allow multiple provisions. We've seen thousands of them in the same order, even, you know. The orders can get very, very large, which triggers another problem about maximum permitted file size. On average, though, the orders that we're seeing are on the shorter side.
If I can just, I can't exactly see the image that Sarah's put in chat because the bottom of it's a bit bright, but I'm very happy to develop an example that addresses exactly this and feed it back.
Yeah, it says to me, it says Monday to Friday 2 times, Monday to Saturday a time range, no loading Monday to Friday 2 times, and then no loading, I presume, Monday to Saturday 8:30 till some other time that is whited out. Yes.
But yeah.
Good to see specific examples of this, always obviously to illustrate things. Let's crack on because we do have some other business to announce at the end. Christoph, John is saying D-TRO provides the tool, but will you support any process of allowing to update those invalid geometries as highlighted by Martin? I'm talking as future data consumer, and we'd love to, yeah, this is what we were talking about. Yeah, we are going to be building this error reporting strategy of how if something is incorrect, it can be reported, and that is part on the future backlog of development, starting this week with the service design session that we had. There's a question from Callum. How will this project of D-TROs and public beta affect the procurement of digital mapping services contracts that LAs are currently procuring? What is the impact of us as an authority procuring long-term services of digital mapping software such as PartMap? In regards to individual D-TROs, we have 3 consolidated orders in the county to cover all restrictions. Would that still be 3, or would all restrictions be required again, creating thousands? As we've been saying, it's the number of orders, just taking that question first about if it's 1 order equals 1 D-TRO. Essentially, the D-TRO is the digital extract of the pertinent information from the legal TRO. That's the principle there. How we affect the procurement of digital services it isn't particularly part of our service to try to be system agnostic we're not saying that anybody needs to go with or affecting any kind of procurement processes. It's up to individual TRAs to decide how best to manage this. there will be a range of digital capabilities around the country, from TRAs that are doing it all digitally right now down to ones that are doing it all paper-based right now. There are various options available for coming on and doing this, from DIY all the way up to a full service contract. And it's up to individual TRAs to decide how best to set this up. We've did talk about some of these kind of issues in our last main webinar. The video for which is on the YouTube channel. So if you wanted to go and review what we said about some of these more policy related questions, it's probably a good one perhaps to go and have a watch of. We'll be giving the link again, and Gareth will be talking a bit about the further information that we have. I think that covers off the questions that are in the chat. Sometimes the chat, just a top tip, the chat does sometimes stay live for quite a lot of our users after the webinar ends. So if you think of something afterwards, you can try and post it in there. If not, if it's not working for you, you can always email us your questions. Or if you've got an issue that you thought of and you're on a GitHub user, you can post it on the GitHub. Peter's suggestion about examples of multiple TRO geography. Yeah, we are working all the time on improving the examples. I think one of our latest initiatives was to create a super example that contains as much of everything as we could possibly think of. We might also be doing an example that's got specifically a type of geometry, say specifically maybe a polygon example, as opposed to a point or linear example, because linear and point ones seem to be a bit more popular than the polygon ones. We might also do a video of demonstrating writing of and posting of orders to the service. This was the thing that was in the agenda at the top that we aren't doing live in this webinar. We have done tests of making recorded videos of doing some of these operations. There is, if there's anything that you don't quite understand, you'd like to see a quick demo of it, send us a line and we can think about adding a video or even doing it on a future webinar as a case study. John, do you want to come in here?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is already one example, which if you look on GitHub is called More Complex. And indeed, that aims to do what John just said. So it covers pretty much all of the model. There's a couple of things that we've noticed it doesn't cover. One of the things we've noticed it doesn't have is actually it doesn't have a polygon in it. It has all of the other types, but it doesn't have a polygon. So I will adjust that and we'll publish that. So absolutely, we're open to providing examples that try to cover these things off. There's no issue with that at all. But there is already content there that would help.
Yeah, I think probably there's a future video or demo once validation allied to camel casing and these other upgrades has gone in, that with the system hopefully then fully checking everything that goes in, we could do something quite good then about showing how to publish and how error reporting has improved and guides the publisher through the iterative process of trying to get a troublesome payload to validate. I think at this point, let's go on to the last section of the webinar, Gareth, and you're going to just run through our engagement and what else is coming up.
Thanks, John. Indeed, yeah. So I just wanted to highlight our engagement program. So a lot of you know we've got regular sessions in with quite a few folk, and we're continuing those. And they've been really invaluable for us to get direct feedback from the service users. So thanks again for participating in those. We will be announcing our next webinar pretty soon. That'll be in spring. So we did one just a couple of weeks ago, as John mentioned, and we'll keep up that regular engagement through our webinars. Equally, we'll set up our next technical webinar shortly as well, and we'll circulate the dates for that. I did want to highlight that we're going to be at the Transport Technology Forum. So that's in Leicestershire on the 7th and 8th of May. So a lot of the team will be there in person. And if you did want to speak to us directly, I'm sure we'll be presenting on D-TRO in some form, but also the team will be there. So it'd be really great if we can see any of you there too. The final one was, John, again, has already mentioned this. We've got a Teams channel for local highway authorities, for TRAs who are self-publishing D-TROs, and if you want to get access to that, please contact us on dtro@dft.gov.uk. As John said, this unfortunately we can't just add people. There is a form that needs to be completed, and you do need a .gov.uk email address as well. And then
thanks, Gareth.
Just a final slide on further information. There's real great use of the GitHub's issues list. So we've got, I think, over 75 there now. And that's a really good open forum, so everyone can post, but also see responses that come through. Transport Technology Forum website. That's got all our YouTube playlists and things that, like the video from here today, the FAQ, and that's where we post regular announcements as well. The final thing was just our email address again. So dtro@dft.gov.uk. That's a direct channel if you want to get in touch. John, that was the key stuff I was going to highlight.
Yeah. We also, on the engagement, we might reach out to you with our user research team. Got a new user research lead, and the work continues. We all very much continue to work on building D-TRO in response to feedback. It's fundamental to the way it's been done all along, right from the very beginning. So we will continue that. So we might reach out to you via various means. Got the big mailing list. We keep sending out stuff via that. If you are moving away from D-TRO and don't want to be on the list anymore, just always let us know. Gabriel, would you like to add anything?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Well, I think at that point we can close down the webinars. We've only got a few minutes left on our allotted time. Thanks so much for everybody for contributing, the team for explaining everything, hopefully to everyone's satisfaction. If there was anything that you think, oh, I wish I'd asked that, then please do drop it in, try the chat, or otherwise email us if you can't get into it after the close. We'll get the questions analysed, woven into the ones we received on the last webinar, get another FAQ update out there, and you can always drop us a line or raise stuff on GitHub. So thanks so much, and we'll be in touch with when the next one is fairly shortly. Okay, cheers everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.